You have kinky and traditional.
I'm definitely not traditional.
Okay, so as kinky lovers, what did you guys used to do in bed?
I like to be dommed. I feel really flattered. The sex has always been a bright spot for us, and so instead of having like every conversation lead to an argument, we could focus on like the positive things that we do have.
Kara did not break down during the fight. That is what made the moment feel heavier. She did not fall apart when Guillermo judged her. She did not completely collapse when he questioned who she was. She did not lose control in front of everyone when the room became tense and uncomfortable. She waited until the door closed. That is the part that matters. Because sometimes the most painful moment in a marriage is not the argument. It is what happens right after the argument ends. It is that quiet second when one person walks away and the other person is left alone with everything they were trying not to feel. That is where Kara was. Sitting in a room that was supposed to be part of a healing retreat. Sitting in a place where couples were meant to reconnect, rebuild, and finally say the things they had been avoiding. But for Kara and Guillermo, the retreat did not feel like a romantic reset. It felt more like a separation happening under brighter lights. And Guillermo had already made one thing clear. He was not sleeping in the same room anymore. That detail changes everything. Because moving out of a shared room is not just about needing space. It is a message. It says the distance has already become physical. It says the marriage is no longer only tense in conversation. It has moved into the walls, the bed, the silence, and the space between them. And once a husband leaves the room, the real question becomes whether he has already left the marriage. That is the question hanging over Kara and Guillermo from the beginning of this act. Did Guillermo come to the retreat because he wanted to save what was left? Or did he come because part of him already knew the ending, and he needed the show, the therapists, and everyone else around them to help confirm it? That is why Kara crying after he left did not feel random. It felt like the answer her face had been trying not to give. Their conflict is easy to flatten if you only look at the surface. People can say it is about Kara selling explicit photos online. They can say Guillermo feels disrespected. They can say Kara feels judged. All of that is part of it. But the deeper issue is more dangerous. This is about whether Guillermo can still look at Kara and see his wife. Not a mistake, not a disappointment, not a public embarrassment, his wife. And it is about whether Kara can still look at Guillermo and feel emotionally safe, not tolerated, not handled, not quietly punished. Safe, that is the wound underneath the storyline. Because when shame enters a relationship, it does not stay in one corner. It spreads. It changes the way people speak. It changes the way they touch. It changes the way one partner hears even the smallest sentence. That is why one simple phrase later hits Kara so hard. I'm thankful for you. Those words should not be complicated. In a healthy moment, they should land softly. They should feel warm. They should give reassurance. But for Kara, they land like a test. Because when someone has recently made you feel judged, you do not hear kind words the same way anymore. You listen for the gap between what they are saying and what they actually feel. You study their face. You question their tone. You wonder if they mean it, or if they are only repeating the exercise because a therapist told them to. That is where Kara's pain is sitting. She is not only asking whether Guillermo loves her, she is asking whether he still respects her. And those are not the same thing. A person can love someone and still judge them. A person can miss the old version of a marriage and still reject the version standing in front of them now. A person can remember the good times and still have no real plan to return to them. That is what makes Guillermo hard to read. He does not come across as someone who feels nothing. That would be simpler if he were cold from beginning to end. The audience could place him in one box and move on, but that is not what this looks like. He seems caught between love and pride, caught between memories and resentment, caught between being hurt and wanting control, caught between feeling betrayed and feeling exposed. And that last word matters, exposed, because the issue is not only what Kara did, it is also who knows about it. It is the public nature of it. It is the idea that other people can look at his marriage and form opinions about his wife, his family, and him. For Guillermo, the conflict may not only be about boundaries, it may also be about humiliation. And humiliation is a dangerous emotion inside a marriage because hurt can ask for healing. Humiliation often asks for power. That is where the story starts to shift from heartbreak into something sharper. Right now, Kara is trying to be seen. Guillermo is trying to decide if he can move past what bothers him. But later, money and divorce enter the conversation. And once that happens, the conflict is not only emotional anymore. It becomes leverage. That is the shadow hanging over this first act. Before Patrick ever brings up divorce, before anyone talks about what Kara could lose, before the room turns this marriage crisis into a legal and financial thought experiment, the emotional foundation is already cracking. And that is why the meditation exercise matters. Because the therapist does not give Kara and Guillermo some huge romantic challenge. She does not ask them to recreate passion. She does not ask them to pretend everything is fine. She gives them something smaller. Sit together, hold hands, breathe, look at each other. That is it. Then the therapist gave them the smallest possible task. And somehow, even that became too much. That is how you know the relationship is in trouble. Not because they screamed, not because they threw accusations across the room, not because they had one explosive fight that made everyone uncomfortable. It is because the smallest act of closeness now feels loaded. Holding hands should be simple. For Kara and Guillermo, it becomes a measurement, a quiet test of whether there is anything left underneath the anger. And Guillermo's face matters in that room. Because when someone does not want to be there, the body usually says it before the mouth does. The shoulders tighten, the eyes drift, the breathing changes, the silence feels defensive. Kara can feel that. She may not be able to control what Guillermo thinks. She may not be able to make him accept her choices, but she can tell when his presence feels forced. And that is part of what breaks her. Because no one wants to beg for tenderness from the person who once gave it freely. That is one of the quiet tragedies here. Kara and Guillermo were not always this distant. Their physical connection used to be one of the strongest parts of their relationship. They had chemistry, they had attraction, they had memories that still matter enough for Guillermo to mention them. But old chemistry can become painful when the emotional trust underneath it starts falling apart. Because then, the past becomes evidence that they used to be close, evidence that they used to want each other, evidence that this coldness is not normal, evidence that something has changed, and maybe changed too much. That is what this retreat is forcing them to face. The question is not whether they once loved each other. The question is whether that love can survive what they now know, what they now feel, and what they can no longer ignore. Kara's fight is not only about defending herself, it is also about refusing to be reduced to one choice, one income source, one conflict, or one thing Guillermo cannot accept. She is a wife. She is a mother. She is a person trying to survive real life pressure. And whether viewers agree with her choices or not, the emotional point is clear. She wants Guillermo to see all of her, not only the part that makes him uncomfortable. Guillermo's fight is not simple either. He may feel disrespected. He may feel blindsided. He may feel like a boundary has been crossed. He may feel like the image of his family has been changed without his permission. But the hard question is what he does with that pain. Does he use it to explain or does he use it to punish Kara emotionally? That is the line this storyline keeps circling. And Kara seems to know it. That is why she listens so closely when Guillermo says he is thankful for her. She is not hearing only the sentence. She is hearing everything behind it. She is asking whether the man holding her hand still sees her as someone worth holding on to. That is why the moment becomes so uncomfortable. Because Guillermo says the right words, but the energy does not fully change. There is softness there, but there is also distance. There is memory. There is also doubt. There is gratitude, but it does not feel like a promise. And for Kara, that may be worse than anger. Anger at least means someone is still fully in the fight. Sadness, mixed with distance, can feel like someone has already started leaving quietly. That is why her tears after he walks out carry so much weight. She is not just crying because the meditation was emotional. She is crying because she can feel how uncertain he still is. She is crying because the smallest connection did not bring the safety she needed. She is crying because the marriage is not exploding. It is fading. And fading can be harder to fight than fire. A loud fight gives you something to push against. Silence gives you nothing. Distance gives you nothing. A closed door gives you nothing but the sound of someone choosing to leave the room again. That is where Act 1 needs to leave the viewer. Not with answers, with pressure. Because Kara and Guillermo are standing at the edge of a bigger question. If Guillermo feels ashamed, can he ever fully return to the marriage? If Kara feels judged, can she ever fully trust his love again? And if both of them are still carrying pain, who is willing to move first without turning that pain into a weapon? The most dangerous part is that this is only the beginning, because later, the conversation will not stay inside therapy. It will not stay inside feeling. Patrick will step in with advice that changes the temperature of the entire storyline. Divorce will enter the room. Money will enter the room. And suddenly, Kara and Guillermo's pain will become something that could be used. But before Patrick ever mentioned divorce, before money entered the room, Kara and Guillermo had to survive one basic test. Could they still sit together, touch touch hands, and look at each other without falling apart. The strange thing about Cara and Guillermo's therapy session is that, at first, it almost sounds hopeful. Not fixed, not healed, not safe, but hopeful enough to make you lean in for a second. Because when the conversation turns toward their physical relationship, Cara does not describe it as something that was always broken. She does not make it sound like the marriage had been empty from the beginning. She says their connection in that area used to be one of the bright spots. That matters. Because when a couple is already living apart, when resentment is already heavy, and when one person has already moved out of the shared room, any memory of closeness can feel like evidence that something is still alive. And for a moment, that is what it looks like. Cara remembers a version of them that worked. A version where attraction did not feel complicated. A version where the bedroom was not just a place for silence, avoidance, and distance. Guillermo also admits he remembers those good times. That should have been a hopeful moment. Instead, it exposed the problem nobody could avoid. Because remembering the good times is not the same as wanting to return to them. That is the trap in this part of the story. On the surface, the session gives Cara and Guillermo a positive memory to hold on to. It reminds them that their marriage was not only fighting, shame, and disappointment. There was connection there. There was chemistry. There was a time when they knew how to reach each other without everything turning into a debate. But that memory comes with a cost. Because once you remember how close you used to be, you also have to face how far away you are now. And Cara and Guillermo are far away. This is not a couple dealing with a simple lack of passion. This is not just two tired parents needing a romantic reset. This is not only about a couple losing rhythm after stress, work, or family pressure. Their bedroom problem is hiding a marriage problem. That is the real point of this act. Cara may still want connection, but connection does not mean she feels accepted. Guillermo may still feel attraction, but attraction does not mean he feels trust. And once trust is damaged, desire becomes complicated. Because physical closeness can bring two people together for a night. It cannot erase resentment. It cannot erase judgment. It cannot erase the feeling that one partner is looking at the other differently now. That is where the conflict starts to deepen. Guillermo's issue with Cara's online work is not sitting outside the marriage. It is sitting inside every conversation. It is sitting inside the way he looks at her. It is sitting inside the way she hears him. It is sitting inside the question neither of them can fully escape. Does Guillermo miss Cara, or does he miss the version of Cara he understood before? That question changes the entire therapy scene. Because if he misses Cara, then there is something to rebuild. If he only misses the old version of her, then Cara is fighting a ghost. She is fighting to bring back a relationship that may only exist in memory now. And that is a much harder battle. Cara seems to be reaching for the one part of the relationship that still feels familiar. Their physical history gives her something to point to. It gives her proof that they once worked. It gives her a reason to believe the distance is not permanent, but the danger is obvious. If she is hoping physical closeness can soften Guillermo's judgment, then she is putting a lot of pressure on something that cannot carry the whole marriage. Because the body can remember what the heart no longer trusts. And that is what makes this session so tense. The therapist is not just asking them about intimacy. She is accidentally revealing the difference between chemistry and safety. Chemistry is the spark. Safety is the ground. Cara and Guillermo may still have memories of the spark, but the ground underneath them is cracked. And the cracks are not subtle. Guillermo has already stepped away from the shared room. That means the relationship has moved beyond emotional discomfort. It has become physical distance. He has separated himself from the space where marriage is supposed to feel most private. So when the therapy session touches their past connection, it does not magically bring warmth back into the room. It puts a spotlight on how much has changed. That is why the next part matters so much. Guillermo is not ready to jump into anything that feels too intimate. He makes it clear that there are boundaries. He is not going to let therapy push him further than he is willing to go. And that tells us something important. He may be present, but presence is not the same as openness. A person can sit in the therapy room and still keep one foot outside the marriage. A person can answer questions and still protect themselves from real vulnerability. A person can remember love and still not know if they want to choose it again. That is where Guillermo appears to be. Not gone, not fully back, just suspended in the worst possible middle. And for Cara, that middle is painful because she is not only waiting for him to say he remembers the good times. She is waiting to see if those memories mean anything now. She is waiting to see whether the man sitting beside her still has a future in mind or only a past he can speak about politely. That is the difference. A future pulls people forward. A memory only proves they were once there. And the more this session continues, the more obvious it becomes that Cara and Guillermo are not standing in the same emotional place. Cara seems to be looking for reassurance. Guillermo seems seems to be looking for certainty he does not have yet. That is not a small mismatch. That is the kind of mismatch that can turn every therapy exercise into another disappointment. Because if one person enters the moment hoping for repair, and the other enters it trying to decide whether repair is even possible, they are not doing the same work. They are sitting in the same room, but not carrying the same intention. That is why the therapist's homework becomes so revealing. She does not ask them to recreate passion. She does not ask them to force a romantic breakthrough. She does not ask them to prove they are still physically connected in the way they used to be. The therapist did not push them into passion. She pulled them back to the most basic human contact. Hold hands, breathe together, look at each other. That is the assignment. And somehow, that small assignment says more about their marriage than a bigger one ever could. Because if two people cannot safely sit together in silence, then the issue is not the bedroom. The issue is the emotional distance that has made even silence feel unsafe. This is where the story becomes heavier. Kara and Guillermo once had chemistry. The show makes that clear through their own memory. But now, they are being asked to do something far more vulnerable than talk about the past. They are being asked to be present. And presence is harder than nostalgia. Nostalgia lets you talk about who you were. Presence forces you to face who you are now. It forces Guillermo to sit with the wife he feels conflicted about. It forces Kara to sit with the husband whose approval no longer feels guaranteed. That is why the hand-holding matters. It is not romantic in the usual reality TV way. It is not flashy. It is not explosive. Nobody is storming out yet. Nobody is throwing a glass. Nobody is giving the kind of loud scene people clip for easy drama. But it is tense because everything is underneath it. The shame, the resentment, the attraction, the judgment, the old memory, the separate room, the child waiting outside all of this adult pain. And the question that keeps getting louder: can therapy help if one partner is emotionally halfway out? That is the question this act has to leave open. Because Kara and Guillermo are not failing because there is no history between them. They are struggling because history is not enough. Their past connection can remind them of what they had. But it cannot answer whether Guillermo can accept who Kara is now, or whether Kara can feel loved by someone who may still feel embarrassed by her choices. That is the painful truth hiding behind the bedroom conversation. The physical part may have once been easy, but emotional safety is the part they cannot face. So they went back to the room, not to fix everything, not to touch the past, but to sit across from each other and find out whether one honest sentence could still survive between them. The room did not explode. That is what makes this scene more uncomfortable. Kara and Guillermo are not screaming across the room. They are not throwing old accusations at each other. They are not having one of those reality TV fights where everyone knows exactly where to look because the loudest person controls the scene. This is quieter than that. And somehow, it feels worse. They are sitting close enough to touch, but emotionally, they still feel miles apart. The therapist's assignment is simple. Sit together, hold hands, breathe, follow the meditation. Look at each other long enough to remember there is still a person on the other side of the pain. On paper, that sounds like progress. For Kara and Guillermo, it becomes a test, because when a marriage is already bruised, even a soft moment can feel dangerous. A quiet room can become more intense than a fight. A gentle exercise can expose things that anger was hiding. That is exactly what happens here. The meditation begins with something basic. They are told to synchronize their breathing. They are asked to become aware of each other in the stillness. That sounds peaceful, almost too peaceful for everything sitting underneath them. But that is the problem. Stillness gives people nowhere to hide. When two people are arguing, they can hide behind the argument. They can focus on the volume, the blame, the defense, the next comeback. But when two people are sitting quietly, holding hands, there is no noise to protect them. There is just the truth. And the truth is that Kara is waiting for something. She is not just waiting for Guillermo to complete the exercise. She is waiting to feel whether he is still emotionally present. She is waiting to know whether the man holding her hand is there because he wants to be, or because the retreat requires him to participate. That difference matters. A forced touch does not heal anything. A forced sentence does not rebuild trust. A forced moment can hurt more than no moment at all, because it gives just enough hope to make the emptiness clearer. Then the meditation moves into affirmation, and Guillermo says the sentence that changes everything. He says he is thankful for Kara. Those words should have helped. They should have softened the room. They should have given Kara a little safety. They should have sounded like a small bridge between two people who still have history, still have a child, and still have some kind of emotional thread tying them together. But Kara does not simply accept it. She asks if he means it. That question changed the entire scene, because Kara is not asking for a compliment. She is not fishing for praise. She is not being dramatic because one sentence did not sound warm enough. She is asking whether there is any truth left in the words Guillermo is giving her. That is a completely different question. After everything that has happened, after feeling judged, after knowing Guillermo has been embarrassed by her online work, after sitting with the fact that he moved out of their shared room, Kara cannot hear "I'm thankful for you" like a normal phrase anymore. She hears it through the damage. She hears the distance behind it. She hears the question she has probably been carrying for a while. Do you still respect me? That is the real sentence underneath her sentence. And that is why this scene works as a turning point. It is not about whether Guillermo can repeat what the meditation tells him to say. It is about whether Kara can believe those words when his recent behavior has made her feel unwanted, judged, and emotionally unsafe. Guillermo answers that he meant it. And this is where the audience splits. Some viewers will see that as him trying. He is sitting there. He is holding her hand. He is not mocking the exercise. He is not attacking her in that exact moment. He says he is thinking about their good memory, and that may be his way of reaching for whatever love still exists. That perspective is fair. Guillermo does not look like someone who feels nothing. He looks like someone carrying hurt, pride, confusion, and maybe regret. He may not know how to move forward, but that does not mean he is being cruel every second. But other viewers will read the same answer differently. Because when Guillermo explains that he is thankful while thinking about the good times they shared, it can sound less like a new beginning and more like a soft goodbye. That is the uncomfortable part. But sometimes remembering the good times does not mean someone wants them back. Sometimes people talk warmly about the past because the past is the only place where the relationship still feels safe. The present is too messy. The future is too uncertain. So they retreat into memory because memory does not ask them to make a decision. That may be what Kara senses. She can feel the difference between a man reconnecting and a man remembering. Those are not the same thing. Reconnecting moves toward the person in front of you. Remembering looks backward at who you both used to be. And Kara needs more than memory. She needs to know if Guillermo still sees a future with her. That is why her question carries so much weight. She is not trying to trap him. She is trying to locate him. She is trying to figure out whether he is still inside the marriage emotionally, or whether he is only sitting beside her because the retreat placed them in the same room. That is the moral tension here. Guillermo has a right to his boundaries. He has a right to say what he can and cannot accept in his marriage. If he feels hurt or disrespected, that feeling does not disappear just because Kara is crying. But Kara also has a right to ask for more than cold judgment. She has a right to want respect. She has a right to ask whether the person who once loved her can still see her as more than the thing that made him uncomfortable. That is why neither side is simple. If you only defend Guillermo, you may miss how painful it is for Kara to sit there and wonder whether her husband is ashamed of her. If you only defend Kara, you may miss that Guillermo seems genuinely conflicted, not cartoonishly heartless. That is why the scene feels so unstable. Both people are speaking softly. Both people are sitting close. Nobody is storming around the room, but the marriage is still moving toward a breaking point. The softness does not remove the danger. It reveals it. Because if Guillermo says the right words and Kara still cannot feel safe, then the problem is deeper than wording. If Kara asks for reassurance and Guillermo can only give her memories, then the problem is deeper than one therapy exercise. The real question becomes bigger than the meditation. Is this marriage ending because of one issue? Or did that issue expose a deeper incompatibility that was already there? That is what the scene leaves hanging. The explicit content may be the visible conflict, but underneath it, there are older questions about trust, power, identity, money, parenting, pride, and public embarrassment. Guillermo is not only reacting as a husband, he is reacting as a man who feels exposed. Kara is not only reacting as a wife, she is reacting as a woman who feels reduced. And when two people feel that misunderstood, even the kindest sentence can fail. That is what happens with "I'm thankful for you." It should have been a small repair. Instead, it becomes proof that the wound is still open. Kara wants the words to mean he still values her. Guillermo may mean them, but he cannot make them feel safe. And that gap between meaning and impact is where the whole scene lives. Then, the exercise ends. There is no big breakthrough, no sudden emotional rescue, no clean answer that lets the audience relax. Guillermo does not fully return to the marriage in that moment, and Kara does not fully receive the reassurance she was looking for. They are still stuck, still close enough to hold hands, still far enough for one sentence to feel like a goodbye. Then, Guillermo stood up, walked out, and closed the door. Kara's reaction told us what the exercise could not. The hardest part was not what Guillermo said. It was what happened after after he left, because once the meditation ended, there was no big repair, no warm embrace, no sudden moment where Kara and Guillermo looked at each other and everything felt possible again. The room did not turn into some perfect therapy breakthrough, because real damage does not usually heal on command. Guillermo got up, he left, and Kara broke down. That is where the scene stops feeling like a normal relationship exercise and starts feeling like fallout. Because Kara's tears are not only about one sentence. They are not only about Guillermo saying he was thankful for her. They are about what that sentence failed to do. It did not make her feel secure. It did not erase the distance. It did not prove he was fully back inside the marriage. And that is the painful part. Sometimes a person can say something kind, and it still does not reach the place where the hurt lives. Kara needed reassurance. What she got was uncertainty dressed in a calm voice. Guillermo may not have been cruel in that moment, but he also did not give her the kind of emotional safety she was clearly searching for. That is why her reaction matters. She had been holding herself together through the exercise. She had listened. She had asked the question. She had tried to understand whether his words were real. But after he walked out, she was left alone with the answer she probably did not want to admit. He still did not feel close. And in a marriage, that kind of distance can hurt more than anger. Anger at least gives you something to respond to. Distance gives you nothing. It just sits there. It fills the room. It makes every small gesture feel uncertain. It makes every kind word sound like it might be temporary. That is what Kara is reacting to. Not only rejection, uncertainty. And uncertainty can slowly drain a relationship because it keeps both people trapped between hope and grief. You cannot fully fight for the marriage because you do not know if the other person is fighting too. You cannot fully let go because they have not clearly left. So you stay in the middle, waiting for one clear answer that never quite comes. That is where Kara and Guillermo are now. But the next morning changes the frame. Because once their son enters the story, this is no longer only about two adults trying to decide whether they still want each other. It becomes about family. That is a different weight. A marriage can end. A romantic relationship can break. Two people can move into separate homes and decide the love they had is no longer enough. But when there is a child involved, the story does not end cleanly. Kara and Guillermo may be able to walk away from the marriage. They cannot fully walk away from each other. That is what the video call with their son reminds the audience. For one moment, the fight looks smaller. They are not talking about shame. They are not talking about online content. They are not measuring every sentence for hidden meaning. They are parents showing their child something sweet, something simple, something outside the heaviness of their own conflict. And that contrast is important because their son represents the life that still exists beyond their resentment. He represents the reason this cannot become only about pride. He represents the part of the relationship that still needs both of them to behave carefully, even if the marriage keeps falling apart. For one moment, the fight looks smaller. Then the next conversation made it bigger. Because after that softer family moment, the reality comes back. Kara and Guillermo still have to face what they are actually doing here. Are they trying to save the marriage? Are they trying to become better co-parents? Are they trying to get closure without admitting that is what they came for? That is the problem. Their son gives them a reason to keep trying, but he does not automatically give them a path back to each other. A child can remind two people what matters. A child can soften the anger. A child can make both parents think twice before turning pain into war. But a child cannot fix respect. A child cannot rebuild trust. A child cannot make one parent accept what the other parent refuses to accept. That is where the stakes become real. If Guillermo cannot move past Kara's online work, then what does repair actually look like? Does repair mean Kara changes? Does it mean Guillermo learns to accept it? Does it mean they build boundaries around it? Or does it mean they admit their values no longer fit the same marriage? Those are not small questions. And the episode does not hand over a clean answer because Guillermo himself does not seem to have one. By morning, Guillermo had to answer the question everyone was already thinking. Did the meditation help? Did he feel the connection he was supposed to feel? His answer is the tension spike. He says there was a kind of connection, but maybe not the best connection. Then comes the bigger question. Does he even want that connection? And Guillermo says he does not know. That one answer undercuts almost everything because therapy can give people tools. It can create exercises. It can push them into conversations they have avoided. It can place them in a room and ask them to breathe breathe together. But therapy cannot manufacture desire. It cannot force someone to want the marriage. It cannot create willingness where one person is still unsure whether they want to return. That is the power shift in this act. Until now, Kara's pain has been the emotional center. Her tears made the scene heavy. Her need for reassurance gave the meditation its meaning. Her reaction showed how much Guillermo's distance was costing her. But when Guillermo says he does not know whether he wants the connection, the story shifts. Now, the question is not only whether Kara can survive feeling judged. The question is whether Guillermo even wants to move closer. That is a harder question because nobody else can answer it for him. Kara cannot answer it. The therapist cannot answer it. The group cannot answer it. Their son cannot answer it either, even though his presence makes the answer matter more. Guillermo says he is there to find out whether he can move past what bothers him. That sounds reasonable. It also sounds unfinished. And unfinished is exactly where they are. He has not fully chosen repair. He has not fully chosen separation. He is standing between both outcomes. And Kara is left trying to read which direction he is leaning. That is emotionally exhausting. Because if one person is waiting for love and the other person is waiting for clarity, they are not moving at the same speed. Kara wants proof that she still matters. Guillermo wants proof that he can get past the thing he cannot stop thinking about. And neither of them has that proof yet. So co-parenting starts to look more realistic than reconciliation. Not because the marriage is officially over in this moment. Not because there is no emotion left. But because the episode keeps showing the same pattern. They can share memories. They can hold hands. They can talk softly. They can both love their son, but the wall is still there. And if that wall stays, then the next phase of the story may not be about saving the marriage. It may be about preventing the pain from becoming uglier. That is where the act should land. Kara and Guillermo are not just deciding whether to stay together. They are deciding what kind of parents they will become if the relationship does not survive. Will they protect their child from the resentment? Or will the hurt between them keep spreading until it touches everything? That question matters because the next conversation brings in something colder than heartbreak, strategy. And just when the marriage already looked fragile, Patrick walked into the conversation with the kind of advice that could turn sadness into strategy. By the time Patrick enters the conversation, Kara and Guillermo's marriage already feels fragile. The pain is already there. The distance is already there. The uncertainty is already sitting between them. Guillermo has already admitted he does not know whether he wants the connection. Kara has already cried after the meditation. Their son has already reminded everyone that this is not just about two adults fighting inside a retreat. So when Patrick speaks up, the whole story changes. Because before this moment, the conflict was emotional. It was about respect. It was about shame. It was about whether Guillermo could look at Kara and still see the woman he married, not only the thing he felt hurt by. Then the conversation stopped being only emotional. Patrick brings divorce into the room. And once divorce enters a marriage conversation, everything gets colder. It is not just about feelings anymore. It becomes about what people can take, what people can lose, what one person might use when they feel powerless, embarrassed, or disrespected. That is why this moment matters. Patrick tells Guillermo that if divorce happens, he could have access to half of Kara's money. He frames it like useful information, like he is giving Guillermo a practical tool, like he is simply explaining how things might work. But the timing makes it feel different. Guillermo is not sitting there as someone calm and fully clear. He is hurt. He is unsure. He feels disrespected. He is trying to decide whether he can move past Kara's online work. And into that emotional confusion, Patrick introduces leverage. That is the dangerous part. Because leverage can sound attractive when someone feels wounded. If Guillermo feels like Kara crossed a boundary, Patrick is giving him a way to turn that feeling into pressure. If Guillermo feels like he has lost control of the marriage, Patrick is showing him a path where control comes back through money, divorce, and consequences. That is why the room reacts so quickly. The women push back because they hear what the advice sounds like. It does not sound like healing. It does not sound like co-parenting. It does not sound like two people trying to protect their family from more damage. It sounds like a threat dressed up as strategy. The room knew exactly what that advice sounded like. And this is where the moral tension gets sharper. Because Patrick could argue that he is only stating reality. He could say divorce has financial consequences. He could say Guillermo deserves to know what his options are. On paper, that sounds practical. But the problem is not only the information, it is the use. There is a huge difference between understanding divorce and using divorce as a weapon. There is a difference between knowing you're right and threatening someone with those rights to force them into obedience. That is the line this scene walks toward. And for Kara and Guillermo, that line is dangerous because their marriage is already full of shame, resentment, and uncertainty. If money becomes part of the fight, then the relationship can move from sadness into punishment very quickly. That is the escalation. In the beginning, Kara wanted to know if Guillermo still valued her. She wanted to know if his kind words were real. She wanted to feel respected, not judged. Guillermo wanted to know if he could move past what bothered him. He wanted to know if the marriage could survive the way Kara's choices made him feel. Those were painful questions, but they were still human questions. Patrick's advice makes the questions colder. Now the audience has to wonder whether Guillermo will choose repair, separation, or pressure. Will he keep trying to understand what he feels? Will he walk away with dignity if he cannot accept the marriage anymore? Or will he let someone else's advice push him toward using the divorce process as power? That is why Guillermo's reaction matters. Because the most important part is not what Patrick said. It is what Guillermo did not do next. In the extracted storyline, Guillermo does not fully grab onto Patrick's idea. He does not instantly turn Kara's money into his new mission. He does not appear to become excited by the chance to punish her financially. He is still hurt, but he does not fully cross that line in this moment. That restraint matters. It does not fix the marriage. It does not erase the damage. It does not prove he is ready to rebuild. But it does show that Guillermo has not completely turned his pain into an attack. And that is the narrow space left in this episode. Not reconciliation, not closure, dignity. That may sound small, but in a relationship, this fragile, small things matter. Because when a couple is already separated emotionally, the next choices decide what kind of ending they are moving toward. Some endings are painful, but respectful. Others become battles where every wound becomes a weapon. Kara and Guillermo are standing close to that second path. Their son makes that even more serious. If this were only about two adults, they could walk away and rebuild separately. It would still hurt, but it would be cleaner. But they share a child. That means even if the marriage ends, the relationship continues in another form. They will still have to communicate. They will still have to make decisions. They will still have to avoid turning their resentment into the atmosphere their child grows up inside. That is why Patrick's advice lands so heavily. It is not only about Kara and Guillermo as husband and wife. It is about whether their conflict becomes the beginning of a co-parenting war. That is the real threat underneath the scene. Guillermo may believe Kara disrespected him. Kara may believe Guillermo is judging her unfairly. Both of those feelings can exist at the same time. But if either person starts using money, shame, or their child as leverage, then the damage becomes much bigger than a failed marriage. It becomes a family system built around resentment. That is where the central question finally finds its answer for this episode. Can Kara and Guillermo rebuild a marriage when one partner feels ashamed and the other feels judged? Not yet. That is the honest answer. The episode does not show true repair. It shows emotional distance. It shows unresolved resentment. It shows Kara still needing appreciation that feels real. It shows Guillermo still unsure whether he wants the connection. It shows a couple who can sit together, hold hands, and speak softly, but still leave the room with the same wound open. The meditation did not fix them. The video call did not fix them. Patrick's advice definitely did not fix them. What the episode shows is a marriage stuck between memory and consequence. They remember good time. They still share a child. There are still emotions there. But emotion alone is not enough when respect feels broken. History is not enough when one person feels ashamed and the other feels reduced. The deepest issue is not the explicit content alone. It is whether Kara and Guillermo can still see each other as full people after shame, hurt, and public judgment entered the marriage. Can Guillermo see Kara as more than the online work that bothers him? Can Kara see Guillermo as more than the man who made her feel judged? Can either of them move forward without using pain as proof that the other person is wrong? That is where the story leaves them. Fragile, unresolved, still connected by their son, still unsure if the marriage has a future. Therapy can create a moment. It can put two people in the same room. It can ask them to breathe, hold hands, and say something kind. But therapy cannot create willingness. It cannot make Guillermo want repair if he does not want it. It cannot make Kara feel safe if the words do not reach her. And that is the final weight of this act. Kara wanted proof that Guillermo still valued her. Guillermo wanted proof that he could move past the thing that changed how he saw her. By the end, neither of them had that proof. And sometimes that is the clearest answer a marriage can give.